Here with myself and with Coach Laura. Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm doing really well, thank you. As always, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you also. And yeah, we already commented on each other's very colorful summery scheme. So obviously things are warm or at least warming up for both of us, which is lovely.
Yep, we'll take as many summer days as we can.
Absolutely, for sure. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about all things protein today. Such a an important topic and something that we address, or one of the biggest things we address with our clients, really. So the topic, as most of you can read it today, is how important is protein really, and how little or also how much can we get away with. So I would like to start off just by what is protein really, why is it even worth talking about? So in general, we are talking about dietary protein. We are talking about one of the three main macronutrients. Of course, if you can count ethanol or alcohol as well, but we're just talking about protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And protein is one of those three. So essentially, proteins as they pertain to our body are our structural building blocks. They make up every part of our body, from our hair, from our joints, not just muscles. I think that's a really big point that's often misunderstood. People think it's just good for your muscles. You only need to eat protein or sufficient protein, more protein, if you want to put on muscle. That is not true. We're talking about all tissues in our body, and that is why protein is one of the essential macronutrients. So, meaning we need to consume it through diet. Your body cannot make it. You need it. It's required for you to live. An essential macronutrients are why we cannot get away with no fats either. So that is really as the listener to know that you need to consume protein through diet. And obviously, in almost everything that we eat, there's a little bit of protein, vegetables or in grains or so. That's why in this conversation today, how much we really need. But there's a structural makeup, and I don't really want to get into the specifics of like chemistry or whatever here. But I'm really wanting to talk about more like how is digested differently than carbs. And I guess my question to you, Laura, is when you take on a new client, or even when you first started looking into this, what was it that you teach why protein is so important? Just like a plan and maybe perhaps cover all the little pieces.
Yeah, so first off, thank you for laying that out. Like people, when I first work with that main focus, and one of the reasons I say, okay, so let's bump up your protein, which will help keep you full. Typically, you have to go into calorie deficit. So why do we want to increase the protein? And women, we want to have that muscular tone, the shape of the muscle. Okay, and to make sure that you're getting enough food so that we need for longevity, vitality. So I kind of start with the low hanging and how is it so important, and then start there, and then start working our way into what did you know this is helping your hair and also your mood. So again, it's just starting at the basics and then building on from there.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And I think, again, I want to make sure that people take out of this that eating sufficient protein or a good amount of protein is not just for if you want to have a defined look or if you are strength training. As a matter of fact, there is actually several studies out there that show that even just by eating the right amount of protein without resistance training, people are losing fat mass and are gaining more lean body tissue, and that no matter how muscular you want to look or not, that should be everybody's goal, to have a lower body fat percentage, or at least a healthy body fat percentage, and a healthy lean body mass. So more lean mass and less fat mass is advantageous for anybody, even if you don't want to have your muscles popping, so to speak. So now that we have kind of like made sure that people understand that everyone should be examining their diet, and we know that the average person barely consumes the RDA for protein intake, which has now been established to be way too low, actually. So this recommendation of, we are going to throw out some numbers here, but people don't even need to get that technical. But that recommendation of 0.8 or 0.6 gram per pound of body weight is really the minimum someone should get. That is not the optimum, not something where someone should feel good or is going to feel good at, yet alone recover well, yet alone maintain lean body mass as we age. And that is simply the minimum. And even that, there, lots of people in our Western world fall below that. So that means if you are just a little bit active, or if you really want to work against sarcopenia, the loss of muscle as you age from the point of 30 years onwards, we need to increase the protein a little bit. We're not even talking about like really, really high levels, because even though protein is very satiating and there can be a benefit of eating rather high amounts, not everyone needs to force themselves to eat that high of an amount. So essentially, it is about finding out what is your main goal right now, as Laura was pointing out, and also what is your personal preference. If you're someone who's struggling to get enough protein, a good goal to work up to would be about 1.6 grams per pound of body weight. If you are someone, I love protein, give me all the protein, I can eat as much protein as I want, you can up that to as much as 2.5, 3 grams. But I always say just make sure that it doesn't come at the expense of lowering fats too much, or of not consuming enough carbohydrates, and therefore maybe not supporting your training and your recovery enough. Would you agree with those kind of numbers?
Absolutely. And again, and I know that this is something probably you'll mention as well, is that is when we start low and slow, depending on where you are, in order for your digestive system to adapt to the additional protein. If you think about it, our ancestors were that's what they did for their life, was hunt and gather. Like they hunted all the meat that they could. So this is part of our genetic makeup. This is just like you mentioned, it's something that we need to consume in order for our bodies to function.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you are plant-based or you're vegetarian, because just because of something that because it's your choice, I would still say this still applies to you in the sense of try your very best to slowly increase your protein intake, and especially in that case, because your protein sources are going to be a little bit harder to digest. It is really worth increasing that slowly. So many people that we start working with, on average, they consume 50, 60, maybe 70 grams of protein, when in reality, we want it to be at least twice that much. And so instead of saying, hey, tomorrow you're going to have to completely eat very differently, that would be a bit of a shock for your digestion, because, and this is something that I wanted to touch on earlier also, is protein is the hardest to break down for your body. And that sounds like something negative, but in this case, it's actually really great, because it means it takes the longest to digest, to break down. So more satiation, more work for your stomach for longer. And it means that actually while you're breaking this down, your body is going to expend much more energy than breaking down carbs or fats. So essentially, and this is called the thermic effect of food. Essentially, you are burning more calories breaking down 100 calories of protein than 100 calories coming from carbs, or 100 calories coming from fats. So this is good news, but again, because of that, it can often be challenging to increase the amount. And sometimes when we have people increasing the amount of protein, we get the feedback, oh, I feel quite bloated. I feel super full all the time. I can't even eat the required amount. And so those are common things. The important thing for you to know is that don't give up, and still continue to slowly increase, and perhaps just look over the sources that you have and look for something that might be a bit more easily digestible. So as an omnivore, and chicken breast or white fish, super easy to digest, or whey protein, super easy to digest. If you're a vegetarian, maybe more some sticking more with the milk, egg white type of sources. If you are on the plant-based side, really making sure that if you're, for instance, consuming protein powders, that number one, it's a mixture, so of various sources, not just a rice protein isolate or pea protein or whatever, but it's a blend, and also that it contains digestive enzymes, which are just going to help a little bit with that absorption. And then, for instance, if you have other things like tofu in there or seitan or so, make sure you don't, on top of that, add way too many beans that maybe you didn't cook enough or were not soaked enough or so. So for you as a plant-based person, the type or the way that you consume your proteins is actually really important. And on that front, more processed is actually not necessarily a bad thing. So of course we don't want the vegan sources that are just like crap and have 20-30 ingredients, but generally speaking, tofu is going to be more easily absorbed than simply soybeans in and of themselves.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I want to layer on top of that the order in which you consume your food. So, someone who is increasing their protein, I say, okay, well, let's start with your protein, because depending on, like, are you having a lot of vegetables? Again, because we just mentioned it slows down the digestion. So, why don't we start, if you can? This might not always happen depending on the meal, but try to eat your protein first, and then follow that with your veggies and your fats, and then your carbohydrates, because it could be the combination of those foods as well, especially since you're just getting started with increasing those carbohydrates, those proteins, and you might be eating the same types of food, and though the combination might not be well for your digestion. So
Yeah, and speaking of combination, I'd also wanted to touch on amino acids. So essentially, I mean, talking about protein, we need to talk about amino acids, because essentially proteins are broken down into amino acids, and those are the smaller forms. And we have 21 amino acids, but only 9 of them are essential, and only 3 of them are branch chain amino acids. So these are the important ones that we really want to make sure we're getting all of them, the essential ones, because as the name says, we need them. So as a plant-based person, you might encounter isolate forms of protein that only contain a few of these essential ones, or not no essential ones. So it's not actually that you have to have all the essential ones combined in one meal. We know by now that if over the course of the day you get all of the amino acids, that's totally sufficient. However, it can sometimes help, especially if you're in a weight loss phase and you just really want to make sure you're holding on to your lean body mass, or you might even want to make sure you're building muscle. If you're newer to strength training, having essential amino acid shake with that, or if you're training fasted in the morning, having those essential amino acids can be helpful. Yes, it might be like a minute detail. I'm not saying that everyone needs to. This is like your number one supplement, but if you're like, hey, I want to make sure I'm optimizing everything, I want to see that potentially, or I'm getting really the most out of my training and so on, doing that might be a good way to go about it.
I'm glad that you said that, because I use this as a catalyst to in in the process of incorporating, because it's when you have the when you know that those amino acids are the building blocks and they help with vitality. I'm in my 40s, so this is very prominent on my mind, is because we know muscle mass is going to decrease as we age. It's just part of aging. So how can I maintain as much muscle as I can? And you and I both know protein is my absolute favorite macronutrient. I will choose it over anything. So I'm getting a lot of amino acids. However, I train first thing in the morning, so I am actually supplementing with amino acids now that I'm in my 40s. Again, it's one of those minute details, but knowing how important those amino acids are in this process, I've even seen it with some of my clients. Recognizing the importance, they're more likely to incorporate the lean protein, the lean meats, and relinquish some of the stuff that isn't as nutritious. And so it's been really, really helpful to just lay that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like for me, sometimes I recommend amino acids when people are like, "Oh, I drink this energy drink," or I don't drink that much water, generally speaking. So I'm struggling with hydration if I don't drink that, or if I don't drink diet soda, and I'm like, okay. Maybe we can look into a little bit of a healthier option if you just like having some sort of flavor. You could drink either an electrolyte drink, or you could drink amino acids. And while it's not super cheap, but I still think it's a good option for people to have anyway. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I do like the amino acids. What I wanted to also get to, and you kind of alluded to this with your comment just then, protein being so satiating, as we talked about, not just satiating, but also it helps prevent cravings or higher cravings in the afternoon, or especially in the later half of the day. And it's not necessarily okay if you're in a super steep calorie deficit and your protein is high. Yes, you're gonna be hungry one way or another. No questions asked here. But generally speaking, if we start working with someone and one of their main things is, I have super high sugar cravings, I succumb to chocolate and whatever in the afternoon, in the evening, one of the best ways to address that is by consuming sufficient protein, meaning like about a gram per pound of body weight or whatever. Um, uh, it's to basically consume that on a consistent basis. And what I just realized, and I apologize for that, I messed up my numbers earlier when I gave those recommendations because I got my kilos and my grams mixed up. So people listening, apologies. I just want to revise that in the sense of the 1.6 grams. That was per kg, not per pound. If you're listening to this per pound, please, that is zero point 0.8 grams per pound, um, and up to, basically 1.2 or even 2 grams as a sort of a maximum per pound, or we're talking about kilos, 2 or 3 or so, or maybe even higher. So apologies for that. That
Well,
is a big note, actually.
yeah, well, and just comment below if you're wondering how much protein. We'll just let you know whether it's kilograms or pounds because it's very individual. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. And this is a really good segue into, can you get too much protein?
Well, there you go. Yes, there have actually been studies by someone named Jose Antonio where they had these people consume up to 4 grams per kilo. No, yeah, was it per pound
Per
actually? I'm
pound.
getting all my numbers confused today,
Yeah,
but it was actually
it
per
was a
pound
lot.
for over a year, and they saw literally zero negative effects on kidney health, because that's something people always bring up in the sense of, is this going to affect my kidney in a negative way if I consume too much protein? And that had zero negative effect. On top of that, they actually saw that these people, even though they were eating the extra protein on top of the control group, so technically they were in a calorie surplus through protein, though they did not gain any extra weight through that. Does that mean you can up your protein unlimitless? No, because at some point your protein is going to be converted into carbohydrates or through gluconeogenesis, essentially. So the protein that your body doesn't necessarily need, your body can absorb all the protein, but it doesn't necessarily need it. That is going to be converted into energy. So I would say, especially if it comes at the expense of having too low carbs, too low fats, we do really want to cap it. And I wouldn't necessarily. I've never put anyone not even close to 2 grams per pound. Like, I would personally not go that high. I've had days where I personally had a very high intake, probably almost two times my body weight in pounds. But yeah, generally speaking, that's not something I would necessarily recommend long term. What about you?
Yeah, no, I usually stick around the 1 gram, 1.2, maybe 1.25, 1.3 grams per pound of body weight. Myself, again, I've gone over a few times and I've played around with lower and higher as hard as I try. I mean, I guess I could try harder, but I always veer on the higher end. You have to start somewhere, but it's also something that I just crave. I know that we share that passion for protein, so I don't need to go too far into that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I guess just going back to the craving side. So if that's something that you personally are addressing in the sense of, oh, my sweet tooth, I can only recommend or comment on the consistency, how important that is. Because it's not something like, for 3 days in a row, I hit my protein target and my cravings are still there. That's not how that works. It's like over a consistent basis of time, you consume high quality protein. That's the other point, because if you just get your protein through shakes and bars and whatnot,
Yeah.
you're still going to have those sweet cravings. So it's not going to miraculously eliminate that. But yeah, long term, more than anything, we should be thinking about our protein intakes for the purpose of maintaining our lean body mass as we age, for the purpose of satiation, for the purpose of the high thermic effect of food, but also for purposes of mental health. There are actually lots and lots of studies showing how important those amino acids are for the production of various neurotransmitters, and therefore like things like serotonin, things like even GABA or so, which help us relax more, which help us sleep better. Very, very important to consume the right amino acids. For instance, tryptophan. We often hear that that is associated with better sleep because tryptophan is high in things like turkey. So if you eat a lot of turkey, you might find yourself sleeping better or a little bit more sleepy. But just generally speaking, also in eggs, there's lots and lots of things that help with that mental health, and the choline in there as well. So I mean, many of the protein sources that we consume also contain other micronutrients which are beneficial, like zinc. But yeah, in general, it is very important for mental health. And unfortunately, that's something that we sometimes see with people that come to us and they're like, yeah, I'm vegan or I'm plant-based. I don't supplement with anything. The first year I felt great. And now suddenly, like, my blood markers are low and I feel really low in energy. And that's with a vegan diet. Often it really doesn't show up after several months, that you might develop some deficiencies if you don't address them at the right time, or if you don't consume the right amount of proteins. Because if you're not conscious as a vegan of your protein consumption, you're going to consume too little proteins.
Yes, and I've seen this on the mood side. It's not really something that's obvious at first, but as a coach, you're able to pick some of those things out. I've experienced this for myself. It's like they've started increasing from more of a plant-based, more vegetarian into
Mhm.
more lean meats. It's like I'm able to manage my stress a little bit better. I feel a little bit happier, and it's like, ooh, I see this trend going, and that's a really, really positive outcome, especially for this day and age. So thank you. Yeah, that's a great point to have out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're really not pushing people towards an omnivorous diet or so. If you are a vegan because you that works for you, that's great. Just make sure that you're not missing any of those smaller points, or like the vitamin B, the iron, etc., which are so important and can be found in many protein sources, of course, particularly the red meat forms. But you can also get them in other forms, or of course, if you don't, then just make sure that you're supplementing.
Yes, great point, because it is possible. You just kind of have to find ways to incorporate some of that stuff into your diet.
Yeah, one of the last things I do want to talk about is kind of the distribution. And often when people hear protein, they just think, oh, it's important around my workout. I need to get it as soon as possible after my training, but otherwise it doesn't matter. And what's your approach or recommendation when it comes to protein timing?
Well, I like again, it's very individual, but as you mentioned earlier, a lot of the clients that come to us, they're really under consuming protein. So let's start with a really good hearty breakfast, because it's you can have a protein shake or you can have those eggs. It's kind of like there are a lot of options to have. Ideally, it is nice to have it more spread out throughout the day, although there are more studies to come out that's saying that those bolus or larger quantities in one meal is kind of does the same thing. Again, might not be ideal for digestion. So if someone's first coming to me, I say, let's start with breakfast and then we'll build onto that. So that's where I start. Again, ideally, it's easier to just kind of pocket it into 3 meals, and then let's just kind of throw things in. I, as we go along, then we'll kind of distribute it differently based on lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, like total daily protein matters the most for sure. Nonetheless, generally speaking, I ideally try to spread it out somewhat evenly. I had my first nutrition coach. She said to me that think of a lawn, and if you water your lawn,
Yeah.
it's gonna grow best if you like sprinkle it, regularly, as opposed to dumping a crap ton of water on the lawn and then walking away, letting it burn, and then coming again, dumping water again. And that's kind of, not really a one-on-one translation, but just generally speaking, most people are going to like naturally get more protein in their evening meal, where they probably have A, the largest meal in general, and B, things more like chicken and so on. Breakfast is really where most people naturally fall shortest. And that is very unfortunate, because by consuming a high protein breakfast, we can set up our body much more in terms of a better blood sugar regulation. So much better. And we hinted at that by talking about the cravings. But yeah, generally speaking, make sure you include, as a female, include at least 25 to 30 grams of protein in your first meal of the day. As a male, more like 30 to 40 or more. Of course, if we consume just a lot of protein in our dinner, what we run into as well is the issue: you get to your dinner and you're like, oh crap, I still need to get another 80, 90 grams of protein in there. As a female, that's a lot to digest as a small person, perhaps. And so ideally spreading it out more evenly. And one thing that almost always is necessary initially for our clients to reach their protein is to plan a little bit ahead. So if you just, even if it's just a few times, you map out your day, your ideal day tomorrow, you enter that in your MyFitnessPal or whatever tracker, or with your nutrition coach together, and you plan out a day of course, what do I think I might have tomorrow? And then you look at that and you realize, oh, okay, actually I only have 15 grams of protein in my breakfast, only 20 grams in my lunch. That really leaves me short. What do I need to tweak in order to get to my targets? Maybe that means instead of having 3 whole eggs for breakfast, I'm going to have 1 whole egg and half a cup of egg whites with that. Maybe that means instead of going for the salmon in my lunch, I'm going to go for a big amount of chicken breast. And maybe instead of having just fruit in the afternoon, I'm going to have some low fat Greek yogurt or something like that. But without planning ahead, just simply tracking and hoping that you're going to hit that number, chances are very low that that's actually going to happen. Yeah, have you found the same thing with your clients?
Yeah, I definitely say let's plan your meals around protein. Let's worry about the carbohydrates and fats later. Let's start with basing it on your protein and pre-cook just simple ingredients, like just cook a bunch of chicken breasts if that's where you have to start. This doesn't mean it has to be a forever thing. It's just to, get lock in some of that strength in that area in what it looks like to eat enough protein throughout the day. And then you can start adding those variables and make it as simple as you can. So that's what I recommend is bulk cook. You have your meals based around that. Keep it simple, and then we can build on that. It's not a forever thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. And just speaking of forever in terms of sustainability as well, when we're eating out, because most people are going to be eating out at one point or another, or eating someone else's meal. And I always recommend basing also, like you said, like looking for choices. And that makes it so much easier when you're looking at menus, looking for things that are high in protein. Some restaurants, even nowadays, put their macros on there. But if you just go for something like that contains chicken breast or white fish or something like that, you're usually on the safe side, as opposed to just thinking, oh, what do I feel like? Or, think about it in that way. And then you eliminate like 2/3 of the menu anyway, and then choose whatever you think might work best. And maybe ask for the sauces or dressing on the side, just to help with overall calories as well. But yeah, those are our main recommendations when it comes to protein. Once again, I apologize about the false numbers. Just to clarify once again, a good minimum target would be zero point 0.8 grams of pound of your per pound your goal body weight, not necessarily your current body weight, but goal body weight, and up to something like 1.2, 1.3 if you really want to, 1.5 grams per pound of goal body weight. And that's a really great place to aim. We don't necessarily have to be much above that. We don't necessarily want to be above 2 grams per pound long term, or below 0.6 grams per pound of goal body weight long term either. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. If you guys have any questions or future recommendations for this kind of chat, please drop them in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Laura, for being a great conversation partner as always.
Likewise, Lisa, and enjoy your protein.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Take care. See ya.